Good morning, good afternoon, partners. Welcome to this week's Business Booster webinar. I am super duper stoked to have Kim from the API guys here with us today to pass along some awesome information and things that you need to know. But before I hand over the reins to Kim, I do want to make sure that everyone can see and hear what's going on. So just really quickly in the questions box, go ahead and type that you can see my screen and that you can hear me. Our general housekeeping practices. All right, all is well, fantastic, yes, perfect. Thank you everyone for letting me know we're good to go before I pass the reins over. But again, I am super duper excited. I can't express that enough, and I've told Kim and Kim the same thing as well, that I am excited to hear and learn and see what she is presenting today. So Kim, are you ready for me to hand over the reins to you?
I am ready, Jen. I was born ready.
Perfect. Let me make you our presenter. Let me know. All right. Did you get perfect? Awesome. You are good to go. Take it away.
All right. Well, I am thrilled to be here on a Wednesday morning for some of you, afternoon, evening for the rest of you. And what we're going to cover today is how to speak CEO, how to make your value blindingly obvious and close more business with less effort. Now, that might sound like I'm going to be teaching you how to sell. And well, kind of in a way we are, but it's really about something much bigger than selling. It is really about making sure that at the end of the day, you are getting paid for the value that you bring, that you know how to articulate that value, and ultimately that you're able to make more money with less effort. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I promise I'm not going to kill you with too much math, but we are going to be talking about some higher level concepts. So let's just jump right into it. What I'm going to start with is what we call the API Guys Manifesto. We have 3 planks in our manifesto. Actually, there's a lot more, but these are the 3 main ones. The first one is this: design, not execution, is where the value is. And and then no such thing as can't, and then ROI, which is where we're going to spend most of our time today. I'll break these out for you just really quickly. What do I mean by that? I don't mean design as in this case, as in like making things pretty. What I mean by that is business process design. If you think about all the things that we do as Infusionsoft professionals, my project manager and we talk about this all the time. It's actually really hard because it, I don't think our clients see the value as much as we do, but the truth of the matter is that anyone can create campaigns and anyone can write code, but not everyone can find money. And when you are doing good business process design, and thinking about that business process design at a high level, like a CEO would think about it in terms of where do I find money, where do I recoup money, how do these decisions make sense from a profit and loss perspective to my client, then the more money you can make because the more value you provide. And not only do I think we as consultants tend to underestimate that value, but I think our clients do as well. And therefore, if we want to make more money and we want to get more repeat clients and we want to have more people saying how killer we are, then we have to get better and better and better at articulating that value, and also being really good at this higher level skill set. We also believe that there's no such thing as can't. And what I mean by that is a lot of times I think we have a tendency to say, well, there's 2 different sides of this coin, really. One is our side, where because from our perspective, we can do anything. When someone says, "Can you do this?" My answer is, we can do anything. It's just a matter of, do you have the budget, right? There is, given an unlimited amount of money, which is never the case, but given an unlimited amount of money, we can do anything for a client. But then there's the flip side, which is when the client says, "I can't, I won't, I don't want to, I don't have the money, I don't have the time." Well, what that typically means is something different. It means that whatever it is that you're trying to get them to do or you're trying to sell them isn't their highest priority, or you haven't shown me the value yet to make it the priority. So that's your job, right? When you're talking to a client about a project or an engagement or about Infusionsoft itself, your job is to make it the highest priority, because there is always time and there is always money. There's, even though we say there is a finite amount of both, it just means that they need to trade whatever they're spending it on currently for whatever it is that you're proposing. Unless it really isn't a project worth doing. But if it is, then that's the challenge that we face. And so what we're going to be talking about here is, at a high level, how do you do that? Well, to me, that's about ROI, ROI, ROI. And this is the world that now I'll just be perfectly honest with you. My background, for those of you, some of you, I believe, know me pretty well, but a lot of you don't know that I've started 9 companies. I currently own 3, one of which is an investment firm, a registered investment advisor firm in Dallas called Snyder Advisors. And at sort of our peak, we were managing or consulting on $500 million with a B dollars in assets. So I have a investment background as well as a CEO background. And so even with all of that as background, right, it's really easy for me when I am presenting to a client to get down in the weeds and want to start talking to them about our widgets and our campaign this and our, even though, and I do it too, right? But the mantra that we use to drag ourselves back up, and because we have to, is this ROI, ROI, ROI. Talk about ROI. So how do you do that? Well, maybe, everyone's heard that term, return on investment. That's what it stands for. It's an acronym, return on investment. Well, all right, but really, what is it? So it has a couple of different components. Let me just go over them with you. The first one is the return part, okay? The return part is, what do I get back? And usually it's some combination of 3 things, and only 3 things. You get back time, money, and opportunity. And in differing, they may be in differing proportion to one another. Your job is to very clearly verbalize, well, first quantify, and then second verbalize what that return is. And I'm going to take you through some examples here in a minute and how to verbalize those. But that's what you're getting. Your client is going to get back. All right. Then we have the investment. That's the I part. And that's, what do I give up in order to get that return? And again, it's the exact same things that I get. I get time, or I give time, right? I have to have staff work on this project with you. We're going to have downtime. I have to spend money with you. I have to spend money on staff. I have to spend money on software, on Infusionsoft. There's always money, almost always, and then opportunity, which I'm going to talk about opportunity, but well, I'll do it now actually. So opportunity is that thing that it's the alternative, right? It's what are you giving up? I actually have a slide on it coming up, so I'll cover it in a little bit more detail there. But it's that alternative scenario. What are you giving up, or what could you have if you freed up that time and that money? And then there's payback period, which is, now this isn't an R or an I, but it is actually part of CEO speak, and that is, how long will it take to realize that return? That's key, because I can have a huge return on my investment, but if it takes me 30 years to get it back, then no, from a cash flow perspective, most CEOs are not going to wait that long to get an ROI on their or a payback on their investment. However, on the flip side, if you can show them how quickly they're going to realize that return, there's all then there's almost no reason to not spend the money, because anybody can float any amount of money. Any decent company, it can float for a couple of weeks, some amount for a couple of weeks. So if a quick payback period is key. And then there's the risk, and now this is one of the hidden ones, and it is very rarely considered, but this is going to be one of those concepts that really, when you're sitting down and you're talking to a CEO, and we're going to talk about how you have these conversations, and how when you start talking to them about risk and risk adjusted return, which is the probability, how likely am I to realize that return, that is what is going to really start to set you apart, and help them understand that, hey, I've got someone who really understands my business sitting across the table from me, someone who's an equal and a peer, that I feel a lot more comfortable with. So I'll explain how risk, how we kind of quantify that and how that fits in here in just a minute. So those are the basic concepts when it comes to ROI, right? So I said we have to learn how to speak CEO. So, well, let's do that. So here's an example. We're going to start with maybe the easiest. And again, I said I wasn't going to, do complex math with you, but I just want to make sure that we're really clear, because you should be doing this math and presenting it to your client, both in your presentations and in your proposals. Okay, so payback period. So here's a very simple example of the payback period. Let's just imagine that my client has what we call a burdened cost per hour of $100 an hour. Now, maybe that's specific to the guy or gal who's doing the work on this particular process that you're talking to them about. Maybe that's kind of just a blended rate across their entire firm. It helps if they actually know what these numbers are, but most people can ballpark them. And if not, maybe you can help them with that, because that in and of itself is a useful exercise. And what burdened means is, a lot of times someone says, oh, well, I pay that guy $30 an hour. Well, yeah, but that's not all the expense that goes into that unit of labor, right? You have all kinds of other costs, the most obvious ones being things like benefits or administration, depending on management cost, all kinds of other costs, and it's up to the accounting bean counter folks as to how much of those costs they really want to include in a burden cost per hour. But whatever it is, we need to know what it is. I'm going to use $100 an hour just because it's kind of easy, and a lot of times, rather than if my client can't tell me that, I'll just throw out a number and I'll say, all right, well, let's just assume it's $50 an hour, or let's just assume it's $100 an hour, depending on who I'm talking to and what would seem to be reasonable. You don't have to know the exact number, but you can make some assumptions there. All right, and let's just assume you're talking to them about a project that is going to cost them $5,000. Now, this is where I found this to be interesting, because I will tell you that when you're dealing with investors, right? Investors are always talking and thinking ROI. When you are dealing at the enterprise level, or even medium-sized businesses and up, they tend to think in terms of these sorts of numbers. But when I, for the first time, really started selling into small business, it took me a while to figure out that when I threw out a $5,000 number, which to me is really not that much, when I'm thinking of them the way I'm fixing to present it to you, well, people would be like, $5,000. I mean, that's a lot of money. Well, it may be, but it may not be. In and of itself, it doesn't mean anything. It only means something in the context of this bigger picture that we are trying to paint. And by the way, you need to know that bigger picture too, because if the thing doesn't make sense for the client from an ROI perspective, you should be the first one to say, Mr. Client, you shouldn't be doing this project. It does not make sense to you. The payback is terrible, and they're going to respect you for that as well. So, all right, so we're going to take a $5,000 investment, which is, a good size project, right? So if we have $100 an hour as a burden cost $5,000 investment, what is the payback period on this particular investment? Well, oops. Well, I got my slides out of order there. It is 50 man hours. Okay, 50 man hours, which is simply, obviously, $5,000 divided by $100 an hour. 50 man hours. Okay, but well, that's fine. But do they spend 1 hour a week on this process? Or do they spend 50 hours a week? Because you can't really tell the payback period until you ask that question. How many hours do you spend on this per week? Oh, we spend 20 hours a week on this project. Okay, Mr. Client, so if you spend $5,000 with me and you spend 20 hours a week doing this activity and the person doing it costs you $100 an hour, in 2.5 weeks, you will have your money back, and for the other 50 weeks a year, you will be saving that that 20 hours a week that you can do what with. And that's the next question, because what people often forget is to ask about or point out that opportunity cost piece. And this is what I meant by that, right? So, oh yeah, now they don't have to do that 20 hours of work per week because we've automated that away for you for $5,000. So, Mr. CEO, what else would these people be doing if they weren't doing this thing we've automated away? And how much would that make? Oh, really? They're going to be doing this more valuable activity like selling, or which potentially would bring in whatever X per week in addition to what we've already saved you. That's the value, right? Of what now we're talking value. Now $5,000 is nothing, right? When in the grand scheme of things, and this is an example of payback period. Okay, one way of quantifying value. Payback period. How fast am I going to get my money back if I invest this $5,000 with you? Okay, so let's do another example, which is return on investment. Okay, this is the one we've all heard, ROI. So let's assume that same $5,000. Actually, before I go on to this, let me just ask Jen, do we have any questions on any of this before I just run on into the next section?
We're good right now.
Okay.
I do have some questions coming up, but just a shout out to all the partners on the line. Please, this is an awesome opportunity to pick Kim's brain on questions. So please feel free to go ahead and throw those questions into the question box. And then as the time is appropriate, I will jump in and have those answered by Kim. So please feel free to go ahead and type away. The first comment I get is, "This is absolutely excellent. Send us all of this." So
cool.
So far, so good. But feel free to ask your questions, partners, and we'll get those answered. So thank you, Kim. You're good to go to continue on.
Great. Yeah, I love questions, and for sure, I want to make sure that if there's something specific to a concept, I know we'll take the broader questions at the end, but if there is something specific to something that I'm discussing, and you're like, wait, what? Be sure and ask, and I'll stop and circle back and make sure we're all clear on that. So, okay, so ROI. So we're going to use that exact same scenario that I just gave you, and we're going to expand on that. So in this case, we've got that same $5,000 investment, and we want to know, Mr. CEO, what is your return on investment? What is the return on your capital that and or time? And right now we're really just, by the way, we're really just quantifying the hard dollars. We're not quantifying the time here, but we could also, if we wanted to go more in depth. I'm going to do here what's known as a simple return. I'm not going to do compound annual return or anything really complicated, but just, for getting something out there for discussion purposes so people can understand what you're talking about. This simple return calculation is sufficient. So what we do is we say, all right, now we already said we had a burdened cost per hour of $100 an hour, and that you spent, Mr. CEO, 20 hours a week of time on this particular task that we're going to charge you $5,000 to make go away. So if we take 100 hours a week times 20 hours per week times 52 weeks in the year, then that's $104,000 a year that you spend on this particular activity. And you're going to pay me $5,000 to recoup that $104,000 a year. So my calculation, again, very simplistic, but this is really all you need is just 104,000 divided by the $5,000 investment, or 20.8%. 20.8%. Now, I told you that I run a registered investment advisor firm. And so I can promise you that as a return on investment, any investment manager would give their right arm to be able to give a guaranteed 20% return on investment that pays back in 2.5 weeks. I mean, it's just, there is no such thing. So in this case, I'm sitting here thinking, Mr. CEO, if you tell me that you don't have this money, then I'm going to tell you that you should go pull it out of your stock portfolio and put it here, because I can give you a way better return on that money here than whatever is sitting. I'm kidding, but what's sitting in your 401k? I would never tell them to pull it out of their 401k, but you get the idea, right? So that's the simple return. And then again, that question, which you always have to come back to because we always forget it, and it's real and it's tangible and it's usually big. What else could those people be doing if they weren't doing this? How much would that make you? Because that is not even contemplated in this 20.8%. And we want to make sure that that you understand that, right? You don't have the money. Look, what are you doing with your money within your organization that is returning you less than 20.8%? Let's give that money a better job, because that's all money is, right? Money is a tool. I like to say that you put little overalls on it and give it its lunch pail and send it out the door every day, and it should come back at the end of the day with 4 of its buddies with it. And if it doesn't have 4 buddies with it, then we need to go find it a different job, right? So unless he's got something else that is earning him a 50% return, then he ought to be switching that money out of whatever it is doing and giving it to you so that he can get this 20% return. That's how he has to be thinking of it, and you've got to help him think of it that way, right? The other question I would ask him is, Mr. CEO, 20.8% return, what does money cost? You could go to the bank and buy money for a couple percent right now. I'm going to pay this back in 2.5 weeks. Like, if you're saying no to this, then it's not the math, right? It's clearly not the math. It's something else. Okay. Now, I want to move on to another concept. Now, this is where it starts to get, this is where you really get to show your chops, right? This is where you get to say to people, yeah, look, I really know what I'm talking about here. And this is a concept of risk-adjusted return. And this is a big investment concept, but it is rarely applied in the business world. And what I mean by that is, that like somewhere in the back of our brain we apply it, but we don't sit down and do and think about it consciously. Now in the investment world, we actually calculate these, and they are big, hairy, ugly formulas that I'm not even going to begin to bore you with, because that's not the point here. The bigger point is the concept, and you to be able to talk intelligently about the concept. So here is the question, and that is, we have these 2 investments. Investment number 1, which is the same $5,000, which is going to give me a 1-year return back of $104,000, and which has a probability of return, meaning the a certainty that I am going to, in fact, realize $104,000 if I spend this $5,000 of 100%. Now, one could argue there's no such thing. My husband, who is in fact an actuary, would tell you there is no such thing as 100% in something like this, but this again makes the math easier, right? Maybe it's 99, whatever. But you're almost certain to get it back, compared to this same investment, which only has a 50% probability of return, right? Are these two investments the same? As a CEO, should I evaluate them as being the same? Well, I think you can look at them and say, well, clearly no, right? The return, when I adjust for the risk that I might not get that return, is not nearly so great. In fact, if I was going to do the math, a very simple way to do this math would be to say, well, if I only have a 50, and this is not good math, by the way, but it's just an easy way to think of it. Oh, well, if I only have a 50% chance of getting that $104,000, then I should really cut it in half and say it's 52,000, and figure that on 5, right? So now I'm talking something less than a 10% return compared to that 20.8% return, because I have a 100% probability of return on the top. Now, okay, fine, Kim, we get it. These two are not the same, but so what? Like, how does this apply to us? Well, okay, let's think about this. What affects this probability? And how can you affect this probability? And or what affects your client or potential client's perception of this probability? Because of course their perception is in fact their reality, right? Doesn't matter whether they're perceiving it correct or not. Okay, so let's think about that. What affects this probability? Well, so this is one of my kind of things that I hammer on all the time. Is I understand why, but Infusionsoft, and therefore most of the partners and people who sell Infusionsoft, will tend to focus on the funnel, right? Well, of course we focus on the funnel. It's sales and marketing software, okay? But here's the interesting thing about focusing on that funnel. If I say to you, Mr. Customer, if we build you this awesome funnel and we automate pieces of that funnel, and so that your salespeople are amazingly productive, and because of that, I am going to get you X% more lead, more dollars per lead than what you were getting previously. With a straight face, really, can you say that that is going to happen? And can you tell him what the probability of that happening is? No. I mean, we like to think it's something. If you were doing a crappy job before, Mr. Customer, and now I'm going to help you do a much better job, then I would certainly like to think that you are going to earn, your lifetime value of that customer is going to go up, right? By the way, there's another piece of math that we aren't even going to talk about today, lifetime value of customer. We'll save that for another webinar. But I can't say for certain that you are in fact going to get more business and that the lifetime value of the customer is going to go up just because I improve your funnel. I can assume it, right? So the probability is something less than 100%. Where can you get 100% probability for your customer? Or at least much higher than out of the funnel? Well, it's actually in the back end. It's in all of those back office operations. It's in all of those inefficient things where somebody is spending 20 hours a week at $100 per hour doing something that you can positively make go away, so that if you automated that thing, if he wanted to, he could literally tell that person, I'm sorry, you you don't have a job anymore, and would in fact recoup that $104,000 per year. That is an almost 100% probability of return because it's a known. You're making something go away instead of hoping for something to happen in the future. And I have always said in my investment business that hope is a lousy investment strategy, right? And so when I'm looking for projects where I know people are going to find value from the work that I've done and think we've done amazing in terms of that return on investment, I want to find things I can make go away because those things are quantifiable and they are certain, right? As opposed to something that I hope will happen as a result of the work that I have done for that client. So that's one thing that affects that probability. Okay. And when you're discussing the different options he has for how he or she might want to put that money to work, then for sure you have to take that into consideration. In fact, one of the things that I do, which is the opposite of I think what most people do when they're looking at Infusionsoft, a newer, say, Infusionsoft client, is I will say to them, look, you guys, let's, for I probably shouldn't say this, but I do. Forget about your stinking funnel. Let's do an audit of all of your processes and let's find all the places where your processes on the back end are broken, and let's fix those, and let's take all that money that I can guarantee we can pull out of that, because I know in almost any business, including my own, if I ate my own cooking 100%, right, I can find money there. I can find a lot of it. Okay, I can get that $104,000 back for you, and now, Mr. Customer, let's go invest that in funnels and AdWords and things that are speculative investments rather than, again, in my world, not sexy bond investments, but bond investments that pay a ridiculously high rate of return. Let's get that money out of your business and then reinvest it in those things that are more speculative, because then if they don't come true, we're just playing with house money. You're no worse off, but chances are you're going to be a lot better off. So I do it backward. I'm looking for all of those places where I can find money. I can recoup it for them by making things better or making things go away, and then I want them to take that money and invest it in those speculative things. And the more speculative it is, the more I want them to do that with house money. So I'm kind of talking to my clients almost as if I'm advising them on an investment portfolio, because it is. I mean, it is really, to me, it's no different. Whether you're trying to decide whether to put this in stocks or bonds or cash or commodities, or whether you're trying to decide whether to put it in, your funnel or your call center dialer, or you're making this silly process where someone hand enters data in 3 different systems every single day. Well, duh, no brainer. Risk adjusted return on the 3 systems having data hand entered is makes a lot more sense. So that's kind of how I tend to think of it, right? I guess probably partly because of my other life, but that is how I think about it. Now, I have one other thing here before I move on about what affects this probability, and that is you. And this is where that perception comes in. What I mean by that is when they deal with you, they are going to perceive some level of risk associated with doing business with you or not, right? You can come off as looking like a really safe bet, safe investment, or you can come off as looking less safe, right? And part of that is about how you present. Part of that is about the language you use. Part of that is about the systems you have, how smart you appear, what level you appear to do business at. All of those things will whether they are conscious or not factor into the guy sitting or gal sitting across the table from you and their assessment of that risk adjusted return. And if some other so let's just take this example here, right? Let's just imagine that this CEO, she's shopping this project out among a bunch of us different consultants, and it's the same project. And oh, by the way, somehow or another, we all come back with the exact same price. Well, where's the difference in the then in if we're all gonna get she's gonna get the same return and we are all gonna charge her the same price, then the next piece of the equation is probability of return. And she's gonna look at us and say, well, what's the likelihood that they're actually going to be able to do this in 2.5 weeks? What do I think the likelihood is that they can pull it off at all, that they won't disappear, that they are calculating these things correctly, blah 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 blah. So your credibility, believe it or not, I think plays a much bigger role in these decisions than perhaps we bother to think about. And by bother, I mean really might be more accurate to say have time to think about. If those of you who were at PartnerCon, I did a presentation in the Big Ideas Summit along with some of our other great ICC partners, Sam Bennett and Jeanette Gleason and Christy Hamilton. We all did, and mine was about eating your own cooking for this very reason, because like half the time, our sites look like are just terrible. Mine too, by the way. I find this really difficult, but it affects this number. It affects this. It absolutely does. People say it to me all the time. In fact, I got an email. Anyway, I won't bore you with that. You get the idea, right? So I will go on, and if you guys have any questions or comments or thoughts about that, I'll leave those for the questions, because I want to make sure we get through the rest of the material. You can tell I can spin off onto a rabbit trail pretty fast because I start to get really excited when I start talking about this stuff. So,
hey Kim, I'm going to
yeah.
jump in real quick too. I'm laughing. My phone was on mute, but I was laughing at the comment. I do have one question that came from the group, and if we're talking with a prospect, a potential client, on the back office side of things, is like $100, is that something that you've seen before per hour? I know it's probably for the sake of like a math equation, but is $100, is that possible, or is it like $20 an hour for small business owners? What have you found?
Yeah, totally possible. So, and it really depends on the level of task that you're talking about. But that's why I was sure to sort of stress the point of burden cost too, because the CEO is going to have a tendency, or anybody, right, is going to have a tendency to forget about the burden and just think about, oh, but, well, I pay that guy $20 an hour. So that when we're calculating my return on investment on this $5,000 that we're talking about, it's $20 an hour. No, first of all, it's not. Even if in fact you do pay them $20 an hour, all of you've got to put the cost of doing business on top of that, and that's, with different, some jobs that's easy to really calculate, and others, you kind of have to spitball it. But if you are in fact talking about, say, say an admin task that's being done by a receptionist, for example, or a warehouse person, or whatever that might be, then even if they make $20 an hour, their burden cost is still probably going to be more like 35, something like that. I find almost nobody ever has pushed back on me when I say, would you say that your cost per hour, what you spend roughly is about $50 an hour, on kind of a mid-level task? And if you're talking about the CEO themselves, which in small businesses you are, very often, and actually this is rolls right into the point I'm about to make on the bottlenecks here. A lot of times, because the CEO is still a doer themselves, like me and the API guys, I do a ton of work. Well, if like, I mean, I don't even want to I almost don't want to say this, but I will. Like, I calculated what my value was on an hourly basis at Snyder when I was running it. I don't anymore. Someone else does. But at one point, basically, an hour of my time was worth something like $2,000 an hour with opportunity cost, right? Well, here it's not worth anything even remotely close to that because I'm a little small business. But my time still today, right now, would easily, between my burden cost and my opportunity cost, I would say to someone, if you aren't valuing my time right now today at anything, at more than like $250 an hour, you're probably way off. And that's almost irrespective at the higher levels of what I take out of the business, truthfully, because it's the higher level the person becomes, the greater the opportunity cost component becomes, and also the greater the time component becomes, because for us that run our businesses, that whole lifestyle component and that balance and that being able to go to the kids' soccer game, and what value does that have, all of those things begin to drive that cost up. So absolutely, when you're talking to a higher level, about a higher level person, and you say $100 an hour, they're going to go, well, yeah, probably should be higher. Hope that, I know that was a long-winded answer, but I think it was a
No, perfect. It was
really
perfect. Thank you.
important, really important question. So I'm glad you asked it. And as I said, it does roll right into this bottleneck thing, because my point here is that a CEO, well, first of all, you should always, especially when you're doing those audits around the back end, looking for those really high ROI activities that you can help with. You always need to search out and ask about bottlenecks. And because a CEO should, and we're using air quotes, should be willing to spend an unlimited amount of money to eliminate those bottlenecks. Now, I won't, pause and ask you why, because you can't answer me, but hopefully you've had a moment to try to answer that for yourself, and I'll tell you the answer, and then I'll tell you why I put it in quotes. So if you look at manufacturing, just as an example, if if one of the machines in an assembly line, for example, is operating slower than all of the others, it's absolutely obvious to that plant manager that that is costing the company tens of thousands of dollars every minute, in some cases, every day, certainly, every week. And as a rule, a plant manager is going to spend an unlimited amount of money to eliminate that bottleneck, because the cost of eliminating the bottleneck never comes close to the cost of the bottleneck itself. It just never does. A bottleneck is always, like, it's just a shortcut, a heuristic. It's always a high ROI activity. Now, part of the reason why I said should is because, throwing stones in a glass house here, one of the things I know from myself, especially as a small business owner, is we tend to be the big bottlenecks. I, in my company, am the bottleneck. I always am. And that, maybe that's because I don't delegate enough, right? And so in theory, if I know I'm the bottleneck, I myself should be willing to spend an unlimited amount of money to eliminate a bottleneck. And while I really, really, really try to practice what I preach here and say to myself, Kim, why aren't you, right? And I've just done 2 or 3 things recently where I hired people. I hired a copywriter, I hired a this, I hired a that. And it's like, and I look around and I go, Kim, how do you have like 8 or 10 people working for you in a company this size when, but it's because I know I'm the bottleneck, but I don't always do it because it's painful when you don't make, a lot of it. So it's emotion versus math, right? The math says do it, eliminate the bottleneck, spend the money, and your emotion goes, well, I can't afford that person. So that's why I can sympathize. But in theory, right, the math works. In theory, if a CEO can be completely unemotional and you could show them the math, they would spend an unlimited amount of money, because it is always going to be a high ROI investment. Always, 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 always. So if you're looking for money, right, go in search of bottlenecks. Okay. So let's talk about, we've got about 15 minutes left. Let's talk about how we might verbalize these things, and then get to some Q&A. So one of the first things, we recently changed this for ourselves. So one of the first things I would say is your job is going to be to find ways to establish those baseline numbers. And one of the ways that we do that is, this is our project development or project request form, which is on our website. So in order to make an appointment with me, someone, this is just a little part of the form, but someone fills this form out, and then it goes through schedule once and blah blah blah, and it puts it on my calendar. And so these are the questions that we recently added. What we did, I'll tell you, was actually really recently, like we had a long discussion as a staff, and we realized like that we had a budget question on here that said, what is your budget? And no matter how much we tried to explain to them that no, we weren't going to raise the price to be whatever your budget was, right? Nobody wants to tell you their budget, so everybody put the lowest number that you give them in the range, right? But really, I don't care about budget, because what, I'm trying to remember, practice what I preach. You should, if I can show you enough ROI with a fast enough payback, your budget is irrelevant, right? You should have an unlimited budget. That's sort of the point of ROI. If I can get you, a 50 or 100% return in a month, then you'd be an idiot not to spend that money with me. So here's what I really wanted to know, and this is why we changed our form. What is the dollar value of an hour of your time? And you can see we said, or if this project is will primarily benefit others in your organization, what's the value of their time? And then what will it cost you if you don't solve this problem? Now, sometimes you get good answers on this, sometimes not, but it's a way to start to establish that conversation, and that we're going to be talking about these sorts of things right out of the gate, right? On our first call. The other thing that we are working on now ourselves, to try to move, do better at this ourselves, is an intake form. So this is what they fill out before they even make their first appointment with me. But then once we get into that meeting, I need to have a kind of a checklist that I go down that very quickly gives me scope. How big are they? What do they do? What are their pain points, etc., etc. And what I'm looking for there is kind of a very fast way to get to clues, so that I can find and scope out and find those things where I can bring massive value the quickest, fast. So the point of that intake form is to try to formalize that process of finding those big value items. So those are a couple of ideas about how to establish that baseline right from the very beginning. But then it's about at the end of the day, you're talking to people, right? So you have to verbalize these things. You have to start asking the right questions. So I'll tell you some of the things that I've been listening to myself and kind of honing my own, knowing I was going to give this presentation and trying to kind of hone my own language. So I'll tell you some of the things that I say, and I'd love to hear some of the things you say. But so some of my phrases are, I'll say things like, tell me more about that, which is my favorite phrase. Keep saying that. No matter what they say, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. How much does that cost you? And then now, very quickly though, here's what I'm going to say to somebody. And this is my budget question, and it's not, but now it's not budget, right? What I'll say to someone is, hey, it just does not make any sense for you and I to spend any time on this, or because we're not going to move forward if the solution that I ultimately propose is going to cost you more than it is worth to you. So is this a $2,000 problem for you, or a $20,000 problem? right? I give them some big number. And now, maybe it's not a problem, maybe it's an opportunity. Either way, is this a $2,000 opportunity or $20,000 opportunity? Because just from their form that they fill out in my head, I can look at that and go, yeah, this, this is roughly a $1,000 project, $5,000 project, $50,000 project. Okay, if I've got in my head that this is a $5,000 project and you tell me this is a $500 problem, right then and there, I'm going to say to you, either, well, this probably doesn't make sense because you should just keep doing what you're doing, or or I'm going to say they don't understand the math, and now I've got to educate them on the math because I can clearly look at this and see the dollars there, and it really is a $15,000 problem slash opportunity, and they're just not seeing it as that. Another one is, what would it mean if we could do X for you? What so or a lot of times I'll say something like, well, because they're not really getting it, and I'll say, well, it looks to me like, so here's one that I had just the other day. So I said to her, so you have 50,000 agents, right? Yes. I said, and you make money marketing insurance companies and insurance products to those agents, right? Yes. I said, so okay, because she's like, what? I mean, we were talking about a couple $1,000 project and $10,000. I said, so if I can increase your commission from each of those agents by $1 by automating X, right? Whatever it was we were talking about, then it looks to me like that $10,000 to do X would have a payback period of 2.5 months. And that's just assuming $1 per agent. You've got 50,000 agents. Like, what if I can get 3 or 5 or $10 per agent? $10, I mean, so that, well, it looks to me like that gives you that opportunity to open that door and kind of verbalize that ROI for them, right? Okay, so those are the sorts of things you say to and ask in order to move your conversations to this level. Now, if you're doing it right, here are the sorts of things that you're going to hear back. You hear people say, and these are things I have actually heard in the last week, no one has ever presented it to me like that before. And then this is the one you really want. Wow. You have given me so much to think about. I used to call that in my, I did many thousands of seminars and as an investment advisor. And what I wanted was, I wanted to get that aha moment, Oprah's aha moment, when I could see the penny drop and they went, holy cow. I knew then we had connected, right? And we were talking the same language, and from there on out, right, it was just it was a conversation. So I want that wow. Whatever that's called, however you get to it. One person said to me, and I kind of laughed at. He said it was a CEO, and I had sent him a proposal, and it had all these numbers in it for the thing that we were proposing, which yours should too, by the way, as best as you can come up with them, even if you have to kind of estimate them and show that you've estimated them. And he says to me, "Are you an MBA?" Which I don't know why I thought that was funny, but I did. So you'll know you're doing this right when you start to get that sort of language coming back to you. So that is how you verbalize. Now, when you can do that, right? Well, let me say it to you another way. Again, going back to my world, my old life. What do you, as a investment advisor, what do you think is the worst trade in the world? Well, you could argue I've made some of them in my career, but I would tell you that the worst trade I have ever made is not one on the financial markets. It's trading time for money. Okay? It is trading time for money. Now, when you are able to think like this, when you are able to talk like this to a CEO, what happens is, number one, you take back your power in that in that relationship. You reduce that perceived risk because she says, oh, well, this person is like a lot less likely to do something dumb, because they think like me, they think like a CEO. And here's the key thing: you can begin to charge based on the value of the project rather than the hours required to do the work. Because here's the thing: if you are going to save them $104,000 over the course of a year, and it's going to take you 5 hours to do that, and you're charging even, whatever, $100 an hour, are you, really? You're going to charge them $500 for something that could save them $104,000 a year? And we see things like that. It's once you begin quantifying like this, presenting like this, talking to them in these sorts of terms, and understanding these numbers for yourself, then and only then can you stop trading time for money. Okay, I made it under the wire. So, Jen, I'm done.
I love first of all, Kim, like you are amazing. I can't thank you enough. I've been like laughing and smiling on mute with the things that you've said. So if you have questions for Kim, go ahead and type them away. I've gotten a lot of like, amen, this is amazing, so great kudos I've gotten from the team out there. But I do have a couple of questions for you. And they got really terrific, all kinds of kudos. So you are amazing, Kim, for sure.
Oh
Couple
gosh,
of questions.
you guys are sweet.
Let's see. Okay, so we know that businesses have different issues, different concerns, etc. Have you had success by always saying some sort of variation of like fill in the blank to demonstrate the value that you bring at the beginning of the conversation? And are there any like magic words or key phrases that you say?
Yeah, I gave you a lot of those key phrases, but so you I want to say that it is not boilerplate. So if I had to like break it down, it's 3 steps, right? So number one, and I said, so number one is establish the baseline. Like if you don't have anything to go on, you can't really establish your value, right? So you've got to get something from them. And that's where that, so tell me how that works. Tell me more about that. How does that work? How much do you spend on that? Kind of those sorts of questions come from. So yeah, you've really got to, like, before you even, but we have a tendency to go right to, oh well, we could do this email and that with that widget, and right, oh, I could write a program that does that. I get so excited. I could integrate so and so with such and such and blah blah blah. It's like, no, Kim, stop, right? Talk about the high level numbers of their business, because then you get a baseline. And then once you have a baseline, now you can start to say the magic words. Is this a $2,000 problem / opportunity for you, or a $20,000 problem opportunity for you? I had a business the other day, like a business that, based on the type of business it was, you would go, oh my gosh, those people have no budget, right? And I said to her, is this a fifth, I'm thinking this is like a $15,000 project. Is this a $15,000 opportunity for you? And she kind of paused and swallowed hard, and she said, it is. And I was like, wow. Like, had I not asked that question, I never would have guessed that she could have spent that it was worth that much, that she had that big of plans for her business. And so, yeah, so those are, of all the things I said, those are probably my biggest magic words. And then you've just got to be an educator. You've got to help them understand that value, and that you make them feel confident that you can bring that value.
Nice, perfectly. And then conversely, I had the question of, are there any phrases that your prospects say that make you back away? Loaded question, probably.
Wow, there are so many. Yeah, so I'll tell you, well, this is like sales 101, but like if I'm talking to someone who's completely low level, and I can tell they don't know what they're doing, the boss doesn't even care enough to have given them guidance, or I'm never going to win that equation, because that's always going to be about price, and I want it to be about value. So that's one of the things. I don't know. You just have to kind of trust your gut on that one. I'm sure I could come up with a lot of them, but I don't want to be mean.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Question for when on the like admin type of things that Infusionsoft can do, like on the back end side of things. Would you have that ROI conversation with a small business owner who's more of in like long-term maintenance mode, or is it still appropriate to have an ROI conversation with that type of client?
Every kind of client, every single client, that should be the conversation, because that's really all it's about. They are what, like, you think they're trying to build a funnel or get more clients or get more, whatever they're trying to do, right? Trying to solve a customer service issue. In my mind, they are making an investment decision, right? I mean, and no different than whether they should put their money in stocks, bonds, cash, or whatever. And so, if they're making an investment decision, then you should be having that conversation with them about how best to invest that money and where it makes sense to invest that money, not about whether it's a widget or a gidget or a whatever. And it doesn't matter whether they're a startup or in maintenance mode or whatever. It absolutely doesn't matter. Build those systems out right from the get-go, because that's where they can get the most immediate, highest impact return with the most certainty that money will come back to them so that they can turn it around. Velocity of money is very important in small business, and put it to work doing something else.
Gotcha. Awesome. I have a couple more questions. I want to be sensitive of everyone's time, so if you do need to leave, feel free. I'm definitely recording this, but I have a couple more questions, and then I'll let you guys go. Now a question out from the group was, Kim, are you selling Infusionsoft, a solution, or yourself when you speak with a prospective client?
I am selling myself 100%.
Perfect. And then I had another question too, which I think is a good segue as well. Where can people get more of your training via audio or recordings or things along those lines?
Oh, thank you so much for asking that question.
It's a question from the group.
Really? You didn't even set me up for that one? So,
No.
all right, so two things. So first of all, we just announced our Art of Campaign Building Mastery course. It went live today, so that's on our website at theapiguys.com, but there's a little short link to it if you want to find out more. And what I will tell you is that like what I just did this hour is a very slimmed down version of day one of the mastery course. So go, if you like this, go take a look at that. But then the other thing is, as many of you know, like, I love to help, I love to teach, I love to share and talk. I'll talk your ear off all day long. So theapiguys.com, I've posted loads of videos and free stuff, as much as I can keep up with. I try. Coming out with a podcast soon. I'm gonna try this year. This is gonna be my year of content. So also, I didn't mention on this slide the Facebook group. We have the API Learners group, which we named long time ago. So ignore the name, because it's not really about the API, but it's just about sharing. And but they wouldn't let us change it once we named it, so I'm kind of stuck with that. So if you're not in the API Learners group page on Facebook, hit me up there. But yeah, basically this is what I love to do. So if you've got a question or you need my help, or I can, whatever, you want to bounce ideas around, just give me a shout somehow.
Awesome. Kim, you're amazing. I'm going to was that your last slide, so I can steal back control real quick?
You go for it.
All right, I'm still in back control. Again, thank you, Kim, for your time, your expertise. I got awesome comments in here from the group. So thank you. I can't thank you enough. I will post this into our Facebook group, and I'll send you the link, Kim. But just real quick, before I let you guys go, join us next week. We're going back to our proactive selling, and Mark Bailey will have another tool that you can use in your tool belt when it comes to proactive selling. But otherwise, guys, thank you for your time. Kim, you're amazing. You're awesome. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Jen.
Yay! I love it. You got your definitely webinars are stinking awesome. So thank you. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to let you go. So have a great rest of your week. Happy December, and I'll see you guys next week. Thanks, everyone.